It's recap time. 3, 2. Hey, quick interruption, Future Chip here. If you're coming from the previous video and you already know the drill, you can skip directly to the recap. Otherwise, if this is your first time, I'll let you with the intro and enjoy the episode. 1. Hello everybody and welcome to the Shower Podcast, the podcast where I'm in my shower and you do you. I'm your host Chip and this is not my usual intro. This is a bit of a special episode. Unfortunately, I will be away for a few days and I found out this interesting way of filling the gaps with recaps from previous episodes. If this is your first time here, use it as an opportunity to find topics that you might be interested in and go back to listen to the original ones. If you are a usual listener of the Shower Podcast, well, again, this might be a rehearsal of topics that you might be interested in. Otherwise, I understand if you want to wait for me to be back. But in the meanwhile, the podcast needs to continue and we need to reach day 365. Having said that, I will not keep you longer. Thank you very much for listening. As always, a like and a subscribe. They are always welcome. And now, recap time.
Hey, welcome to a slightly different deep dive today.
Yeah, doing something a bit different.
Our pal Chip over at the Shower Podcast asked us to take a look back at a recent little series he did, episodes 81, 82, 91, 92, and 93.
Right, 5 of them.
So if you happen to miss those, or, just want a quick refresher, you're definitely in the right place.
We're going to kind of hit the highlights.
Exactly. We'll go through them in order, touch on the main ideas, the key insights, maybe even some of the lighter moments he shared.
And if anything sounds really interesting, definitely check out the originals. Chip goes into way more detail.
For sure. Okay, so first up was episode 81. He called it Threshold.
Ah, yes, Threshold. What struck me about that one was while he used really personal stuff, like his ankle injury.
Right, the banged up ankle.
Yeah, and like the state of his apartment, to explain this whole concept of thresholds and tolerances in our lives, what we sort of get used to.
It's so true, though. He talked about how, with the ankle, after maybe 3 or 4 days, the initial pain, it wasn't gone, but it wasn't bothering him in the same way.
His threshold for that discomfort had actually gone up. He'd adapted.
And it's the same with the apartment cleanliness example he gave. You build up a tolerance for a certain level of, mess.
A little bit of clutter becomes the norm.
Yeah. And then the threshold for it actually bothering you enough to clean gets really high. It's suddenly harder to even start.
It doesn't trigger that must clean now feeling as easily. And he connected that to cooking versus eating out, too.
Oh, that was a great one.
After a string of takeaways, the effort needed to switch back to cooking, like chopping vegetables and all that. It just feels huge.
That threshold is way up there.
But if you only had, say, one night off from cooking, getting back to it the next day, much easier, lower threshold.
It totally made sense. Like, every action has this kind of memory of effort attached to it.
Yeah, a memory, that's a good way to put it. Things that caused pain or needed big effort, you're sort of less inclined to jump right back into them.
And then the habit connection was really interesting. How easy it is to break a good habit. That threshold is super low.
Oh, depressingly low sometimes.
Right, but getting back to the good habit after a break, that can feel like climbing a mountain.
Whereas the bad habits, or maybe just less healthy ones, the longer you do them, the higher the threshold feels for going back to the healthier routine. It gets harder and harder.
So the big takeaway from 81 was really about awareness, wasn't it? Being mindful of the thresholds you're setting in your life.
Yeah, and asking yourself, are these thresholds actually helping me? Or are they maybe holding me back? Do I need to consciously try and recalibrate them?
Good stuff to think about. Okay, so next was episode 82, which had the pretty bold title, Your Plan Won't Work.
Huh. Yeah, that sounds a bit provocative.
It did, but it followed on nicely. He'd just cleaned his apartment after this threshold talk, feeling reset after the injury. Good mood.
Right. Feeling positive. Cleared space, cleared mind.
But then he tried to execute this really detailed morning plan he'd made, and,
Reality intervened.
basically, yeah, he wanted to be super productive, had it all mapped out, but then he got sidetracked watching some videos, waiting for laundry, life.
Happens to the best of us. The minute-by-minute plan just went out the window.
Exactly. And he was quick to say, look, this isn't anti-planning. Planning is good. It gives structure, helps you reach goals.
Of course, you need some kind of plan.
But the problem, he argued, is with those hyper-detailed, rigid plans. Because you just can't predict everything, the future, your energy levels, interruptions.
And when the plan inevitably falls apart, even a little bit, it can be really discouraging. You feel like you failed.
Totally. So his alternative was setting broader goals instead.
Right. Like instead of 8.0, 8.30 clean kitchen counter. Just have a goal. Clean the kitchen. Or maybe tidy living room, kitchen, bedroom.
Yeah, the main things you want to get done, but without locking in the specific order or method. More flexibility.
And he talked about the momentum you get from just starting one of those things.
Oh yeah, the snowball effect. You do one task, feel good, and then you're more likely to just roll into the next one.
Makes it easier to achieve the overall goals without the pressure of a strict schedule. Trust your future self a bit more.
Plus that little reminder again about taking care of your space, how it helps your headspace.
Definitely. So the key takeaway there, focus on the bigger picture goals, trust yourself to handle them, and maybe ditch the super rigid plans that set you up for frustration.
Makes sense. Okay, moving on. We jump a bit to episode 91. This one started with a bit of a shocker. It's over. April Fools.
Ah, yes, I remember seeing that title. He got a few people, I bet.
I reckon so. A classic April Fool's prank. He announced the podcast was ending because he'd, sold the idea.
He even cleverly tied it into the episode's thumbnail, which was about the end of the previous era of AI image generation.
Nicely done. But yeah, the real topic was actually the release of OpenAI's new image generation model at the time, which was a pretty big deal.
It really was. He talked about the shift in how it worked, moving away from the older diffusion method.
Which starts from noise, right? Like static on a TV.
Yeah, kind of refining noise into an image. This new one used more of a token approach, building the image sequentially, almost like how language models predict the next word, top to bottom.
Interesting. And the results were noticeably better.
Oh, definitely. He mentioned it being much better at replicating specific styles. He used the Ghibli style as an example.
Wow. Okay.
And getting images that were way more accurate to the text descriptions. And crucially, it could actually render text within the images properly.
Finally. That used to be a huge problem, just getting readable text in an AI image.
Massive hurdle. But with this big leap came, well, some ethical questions he raised.
Right. About the training data.
Yeah. How does it get so good at replicating styles? Where does that data come from? And are the original artists being credited or compensated? He called the copyright situation shaky.
That's a recurring theme with AI development, isn't it?
It is. And he thought about the impact on artists, especially maybe those just starting out or less established. The tech gets better and better at mimicking.
So what does that mean for human creativity?
Well, his thought was maybe the focus shifts even more towards the artist's unique perspective, the concept, the extra value they bring, beyond just technical skill replication.
That makes sense. He also mentioned something about AI models talking to other tools.
Yes, standardization allowing these large language models to interact with other software and resources, framing them as powerful tools, but still ultimately tools.
So the takeaway from the April Fool's episode beyond the prank was powerful new AI tools are here, but we need to think about the ethics, and artists need to focus on their unique contributions.
Exactly, and relief that the podcast wasn't actually over.
Yeah.
He sounded excited to get back to regular episodes.
Definitely. Okay, next up, episode 92. Once in a while, this felt quite different, more reflective.
Yeah, it was. Apparently inspired by thoughts he had during a late-night journey back from Milan.
He was musing on those brief, sometimes unexpectedly deep connections you can have with people.
Not just romantic ones, right? Could be colleagues, friends you don't see often, even total strangers.
Exactly. He gave this really nice example of a 1-hour chat he had with a colleague on a work ski trip. Someone he didn't know well.
But they just clicked over shared interests. Tech and music, I think he said.
Yeah. And his point was how these connections can feel like they operate outside of normal time constraints. You can see a lot of a person in a really short period.
Like a concentrated glimpse into who they are.
He also talked about those intense, maybe fleeting connections you might form in specific situations, knowing it's not necessarily going anywhere long term.
And how maybe that lack of future expectation allows for a different kind of honesty.
That was his feeling. Less bias, less pressure, maybe more genuine self-disclosure because the usual stakes aren't there.
Interesting idea. So what's the value in these once-in-a-while moments?
He felt they can actually give you a clearer understanding of people and kind of by extension help you understand your own feelings and reactions better when you interact with the regular people in your life.
Ah, so it's like a reference point. Helps you calibrate your own emotional responses.
Sort of, yeah. So his encouragement was basically be open to these moments. Don't dismiss them just because they're brief. they can be really valuable for self-reflection.
Cherish those rare connections, even the fleeting ones. Good advice.
And he finished with a little teaser hinting at some frustrations coming up.
Right, related to thumbnails.
Yeah.
Which leads us perfectly into the next one.
It does. Episode 93, nothing works.
Yeah.
And you could really hear the frustration in this one.
Yeah. He even started by apologizing for a tech glitch with episode 92 on Spotify, which probably didn't help his mood.
No kidding. But the main focus was his struggle trying to use that new AI image generator, the one he was excited about in episode 91 for his thumbnails.
Ah, the reality check after the initial excitement.
Totally. He described this cycle. Initial fun, trying something basic, works okay. Then trying something more complex and hitting a wall.
What kind of problems was he having?
Well, he mentioned trying for a specific paperish feeling that just didn't come out right. And then other attempts apparently resulted in monsters, was his word.
Huh. Oh dear. Not ideal for a thumbnail.
Not really. He said listeners should check the visuals. It sounded like a real battle between his creative idea and the tool's capabilities at that time.
And he pinpointed a key limitation, didn't he? The lack of refinement.
Exactly. You couldn't just make small edits. Trying to fix one little thing often meant the AI would regenerate the entire image, often changing it completely.
Oh, that sounds incredibly frustrating for any creative process. You lose all control.
Yeah. And that led him to reflect on that feeling, that mindset of nothing works, when you just feel like you're constantly failing and hitting dead ends.
We've all been there. It's a really negative headspace.
Totally. And his big strategy, his takeaway for dealing with it, was simple but crucial. Stop.
Just stop what you're doing.
Yeah. Recognize you're in that funk, take a break, reset your mindset, go for a walk, step away, start fresh later, anything to break that cycle.
Because when you're in that frustrated state, your judgment gets clouded. Right? Problems seem bigger than they are.
Precisely. And he stressed this applies to any creative work, not just fighting with AI tools. Anytime you hit that nothing works wall.
It's good advice. Sometimes stepping away is the most productive thing you can do.
He also talked about managing expectations for this personal project, the podcast, not obsessing over perfection, being okay with decent results.
Finding that balance, consistency over perfection.
Yeah, he highlighted that just keeping going, accepting occasional errors or imperfections is more important for long-term progress. Like the podcast itself is an example of that ongoing process.
So the key lesson from 93, recognize that nothing works, feeling. Actively hit reset, take breaks, and value consistency and progress over some unattainable ideal of perfection.
Absolutely. A really practical and relatable episode, actually.
Yeah, definitely resonated.
So there you have it. A quick dip back into those 5 episodes from Chip. It's actually really interesting seeing the threads connect, you know?
It is. From personal habits and thresholds to dealing with plans, navigating new tech, the value of human connection, and then handling creative frustration.
All sparked from his everyday thoughts and experiences.
We hope this recap was useful, gave you a good overview.
Yeah, hopefully some food for thought. And like we said, if any of these topics really caught your ear, definitely go check out the original Shower Podcast episodes. Chip obviously goes much deeper.
For sure. He shares a lot more detail and personal reflection in the full episodes.
Well, thanks for joining us for this little deep dive recap. We appreciate you tuning in.
Yeah, thanks everyone.
And we'll catch you tomorrow for more insights. See you tomorrow.